Two records exist for the last night anyone saw Libby Ann Dibenedetto alive. One says June 12th, 2000. The other says April 11th, 2000. Both can't be right. But there is one detail every account agrees on. She left Duke's Bar and Grill in Davie, Florida, sometime after 1 in the morning, and she never made it home. Her house was less than half a mile away. For 23 years, that half mile stayed empty. No car, no remains, no answer. Then, in the spring of 2025, a group of volunteer divers pulled a gold Toyota Camry out of a retention pond a few minutes from where she vanished, a pond that had sat there in plain sight the entire time. This is the story of how a mystery survived so close to home for so long, and what it took to finally close the distance. Libby Dibenedetto was 35 years old, a nurse working at a doctor's office in South Florida, and the mother of 3 young children. Her marriage had recently ended in divorce, and she had moved back in with her mother in Sunrise, a quiet suburb west of Fort Lauderdale. She was, by the accounts that survive her, someone rebuilding a routine after a difficult year, sharing a household with her mother again as an adult, adjusting 3 children to a new custody arrangement, and returning to work as the more immediate demands of the divorce settled. None of that is unusual. It's the kind of transition thousands of people go through every year, and there is nothing in the record to suggest it was heading anywhere but toward an ordinary, if difficult, new normal. She was being treated for depression at the time, and according to her family, she had gone without her prescribed medication in the period before she disappeared. That detail matters not because it explains what happened to her, but because it is one of the few verified facts investigators had to work with from the beginning, and because it shaped how her case was understood for over 2 decades. On the night in question, Libby joined co-workers at Duke's Bar and Grill in Davie to celebrate a colleague's birthday. It was an ordinary night out. Friends, a bar, a birthday. Nothing about the evening suggested it would be her last. Sometime after 1 in the morning, she left. She was driving her own car, a beige 1996 Toyota Camry, easy to pick out of a parking lot by the Florida Marlins and Miami Dolphins bumper stickers on the back. At some point after leaving the bar, she made a phone call from a payphone near the intersection of North Pine Island Road and West Sunrise Boulevard. The call was to her therapist. It is the last confirmed contact anyone had with her. After that call, nothing. No further calls, no sightings, no contact with her mother, her children, or anyone else who knew her. The description that went out afterward was specific enough to feel almost intimate. A woman 5'6", between 140 and 150 pounds, black hair, brown eyes, last seen wearing a burgundy long-sleeve shirt and black pants. Her car had a Florida license plate, XJF84P, and it was decorated with Florida Marlins and Miami Dolphins bumper stickers, the kind of small personal detail that turns a vehicle description into a portrait of a person's ordinary life. She rooted for local teams. She drove her kids around in that car. It was hers. She was reported missing, and a search began, but she was already gone. Not from the world, it would turn out, but from the reach of the search itself. Her car was never found. She was never seen again, and the distance between where she made that final phone call and where she was ultimately found would turn out to be measured not in miles, but in a few city blocks. What happened in the weeks after Libby's disappearance is, by any documentary standard, thin. Sunrise Police opened a missing persons case. Family members have described the search that followed as extensive, but few specifics from that period survive in the public record. No named lead detective, no press conference, no contemporaneous news coverage has surfaced describing what ground was covered or which leads were chased. Even the paperwork disagrees with itself. Some official case databases list her date of disappearance as June 12, 2000, reporting connected to the 2025 discovery lists it as April 11th, 2000. Both dates trace back to records built at different points in the case's history, and neither can be dismissed outright without access to the original police report. What matters for the documentary record is not which date is correct, but what the contradiction reveals. A quarter-century-old missing persons case where even the basic facts had never been fully reconciled. That's not a filing error to gloss over. It's a small, honest window into how thin the paper trail on this case really was. What is clear is what did not happen. Her car was never located, not on a roadside, not in a parking lot, not in any of the canals, retention ponds, or waterways that define the drainage geography of Broward County, a landscape where nearly every neighborhood sits beside some form of engineered water. South Florida's flat terrain and high water table mean that almost every subdivision, strip mall, and roadway is built alongside a retention pond or canal designed to manage storm water. There are thousands of them across the county, most unnamed, most unremarkable, and in the year 2000, none of them had ever been systematically searched as a group for a missing vehicle. A car leaving the road in the wrong spot didn't need to travel into wilderness to vanish. It only needed to reach the nearest engineered basin, sink past the sightline of the shore, and settle into water that no one had reason to search. That absence became the case. For the next 23 years, Libby Dibenedetto existed in the same category as thousands of other missing Americans. A name in a database, a photograph on a flyer, a case number 33-5 DFFL, attached to almost no forward motion. Her file entered the National Missing and Unidentified Person System, cataloged as Case 3315 DFFL. It sat there. Broward County kept growing around the spot where her car rested 13 feet down in a pond most residents would have passed without a second look, close enough eventually to sit near a grocery store parking lot. Consider what changed in that area over 23 years while her car stayed exactly where it was. Shopping centers were built, roads were repaved, an Aldi grocery store went up within sight of the water. New families moved into the surrounding subdivisions, unaware that a stretch of retention pond a few minutes from their homes had never been cleared. The geography around Libby's case didn't stay frozen in the year 2000. It kept moving forward, indifferent, while the one fact that could have closed the case sat motionless beneath the surface the entire time. Missing persons cases like hers don't stay in the public eye. There was no annual news segment marking the anniversary, no billboard campaign, no renewed appeal that surfaces in the archive. What kept the case alive at all was a smaller, quieter kind of persistence. A family that never stopped wondering, and eventually an organization willing to treat a 20-year-old case with the same urgency as a fresh one. There is a temptation in telling a story like this to fill that silence with theories, to suggest foul play or deliberate disappearance or some hidden second life. None of that is supported by the record. What the record actually shows is simpler and, in its own way, more unsettling. A woman vanished from a half-mile stretch of ordinary suburban road, and for more than 2 decades, nobody looked in the right place, because nobody knew where the right place was. As the man who would eventually find her put it plainly, years later, they didn't know which direction she'd gone when she left the bar. Without that, there was no map to follow, only a widening field of water that had never been ruled out. In July 2022, a volunteer organization called Sunshine State the Sonar took on Libby's case. The group, based out of St. Petersburg, specializes in a specific and unglamorous form of investigation, searching bodies of water for vehicles connected to missing persons cases that law enforcement has not been able to close. Their method starts from a basic premise. In Florida, and especially in South Florida, retention ponds, canals, and drainage basins are everywhere. Built into nearly every subdivision, every commercial strip, every stretch of road. A car that leaves the pavement in the wrong place doesn't have to travel far to disappear completely. It just has to sink. Side-scan sonar makes it possible to search that kind of water without needing to see through it. The equipment sends out acoustic pulses and reads what bounces back, building a picture of the pond floor even in water too dark or too deep for a diver to search by sight alone. In Florida's retention ponds, visibility underwater is often measured in inches, not feet. The same murky sediment that made the original search so difficult is exactly what side-scan sonar is built to see past. It doesn't replace diving. A diver still has to go down and confirm what the sonar has flagged, since sonar can mistake debris, shopping carts, or old tires for a vehicle-shaped target. But it lets a small team clear far more water than manual searching ever could, testing locations that had never been meaningfully checked in the first place. That distinction matters because it explains why a 22-year-old missing persons case could suddenly become solvable with volunteer resources instead of a police department's dive team. It isn't that the technology itself is new. Side-scan sonar has existed in some form for decades. It's that applying it systematically, pond by pond, across an entire county on a case with no other leads requires exactly the kind of sustained, unpaid persistence that a small nonprofit dive team could offer in a way an overburdened department, working hundreds of open cases at once, often cannot. Without a known route out of the bar's parking lot and without a documented direction of travel, the team had almost nothing to narrow their search, so they didn't narrow it. Over the next 2.5 years, Sunshine State Sonar carried out nearly 36 separate search deployments connected specifically to Libby's case as part of a broader effort that eventually covered roughly 400 different bodies of water across Broward County. This is what theory elimination looks like when there is no theory to begin with. Not a chase toward one suspect location, but a slow, methodical clearing of hundreds of possibilities, one pond at a time, until only a small number remained unchecked. By 2025, the team had built a track record that gave the method credibility beyond a single case. A little over a year earlier, in December 2023, the same organization located the remains of a different missing woman, Sandra Lemire, inside a minivan submerged in a retention pond near Walt Disney World. A case that had gone unsolved for 12 years, cracked only after a tip about a cell tower narrowed the search area. Libby's case offered no comparable tip. There was no cell tower record, no narrowing clue. It was, by the team's own account, one of the harder searches they'd taken on, precisely because it started with nothing to eliminate a location by only a bar, a payphone, and a half-mile of unanswered road. Each deployment that came back empty didn't feel like failure to the team. It removed one more place from the map. And somewhere in that shrinking field of water, a car was waiting. On Sunday, April 6, 2025, the search reached a retention pond near the intersection of West Sunrise Boulevard and North Flamingo Road in Plantation, just west of a busy shopping strip anchored by an Aldi grocery store. Thousands of cars pass that intersection every day. Sonar readings from the pond showed something on the bottom roughly 13 feet down with a shape that matched a vehicle. Divers went in to confirm it. What they found was a gold 1996 Toyota Camry resting where it had apparently been for 25 years. Skeletal remains were inside. The team surfaced, secured the scene, and notified Plantation Police, who confirmed the vehicle's connection to Sunrise's decades-old missing persons case. By the following day, the discovery was public. Sunshine State Sonar posted the find on social media, thanking the fire and police departments of both Plantation and Sunrise for their support in the recovery, along with the Plantation Fire Department's dive team, a Plantation police officer who had assisted the search effort the previous year. and a local towing company that helped pull the submerged Camry out of the water. Recovering a vehicle from 13 feet of pond sediment isn't a one-team operation. It takes divers to confirm the target, a fire department dive team for the physical extraction, police to secure and process the scene, and heavy equipment to actually bring the car to the surface without destroying evidence in the process. The proximity is what makes this discovery difficult to sit with. The pond sits a short drive, not a long one, from the payphone where Libby made her final call, and not far at all from the house she was trying to reach that night. For 25 years, her car had been submerged within a few minutes of the ordinary, everyday geography of her own neighborhood. A bar, a road, a shopping center, a pond built to catch stormwater runoff, doing exactly what it was engineered to do while holding a mystery no one had thought to look for there. The following day, investigators returned to the scene, working through the sediment at the bottom of the pond well into the afternoon, searching for anything further that could support the identification or explain what had happened. It was slow, unglamorous work, the kind that rarely makes it into the story of a discovery, but without which no identification can be confirmed. Sunrise Police said publicly that they were waiting on formal identification before confirming the remains belonged to Dibenedetto, but Sunshine State Sonar had already matched the vehicle's details, the make, the model, the year, the color, against the description that had circulated for a quarter century. For the family, the wait for confirmation carried a different weight than it might in another case. They had already waited 25 years. A few more days for official paperwork was almost beside the point. Local reporters who reached the family in the days after the discovery said they were aware of what had been found and were waiting, like everyone else, for it to be made official. For neighbors who lived near the pond, the news landed differently. A quiet unease about a place they passed every day. One resident told a local news crew it was sad to think Libby had been there the whole time, and that she hoped the discovery would finally bring the family some closure. It was a small, unremarkable comment, but it captured something true about the case. An ordinary corner of a subdivision had been holding an extraordinary secret in plain view, and no one had known to look twice. The founder of the search team later described it as one of the hardest cases his group had worked, precisely because of what was missing at the start. No direction of travel, no eyewitness account of where she went after the bar. What eventually closed the case wasn't a single tip or single insight. It was the elimination of nearly 400 wrong answers, until one pond a few minutes from home turned out to be the right one. It's worth being precise about what this discovery actually established and what it did not. The vehicle recovered from the plantation pond matches Libby Dibenedetto's Toyota Camry in make, model, year, and color. Skeletal remains were found inside it. Formal identification through the medical examiner's office was still pending at the time of the discovery, which is standard procedure and does not diminish the strength of the physical match. What remains genuinely unresolved is the cause of death. No official determination had been announced. The organization that found the vehicle stated publicly that foul play was not suspected, consistent with a case that had never generated evidence of a struggle, a crime scene, or a third party's involvement. But not suspected is not the same as ruled out, and a responsible account of this case has to leave that distinction intact. What happened between the payphone call and the moment her car entered the water is still factually unknown. That uncertainty doesn't cancel out what was accomplished. For 25 years, Libby Dibenedetto's family lived without a single confirmed fact about what happened to her after that phone call. They didn't know if she was alive somewhere, struggling, unreachable. They didn't know if she had been the victim of violence. They had a case number and a photograph and very little else. What changed in April 2025 wasn't a solved crime. It was the end of not knowing a vehicle, a set of remains, a specific pond with a specific address. Facts a family could finally hold on to, replacing 25 years of unanswered possibility. The case also says something larger about how missing persons investigations age. In 2000, the tools available to search hundreds of retention ponds across the county didn't practically exist for a case like this one. Divers can only cover so much water, and without a direction to point them, there was no way to prioritize where to look. It took a volunteer organization working 2.5 years and roughly 400 bodies of water to do what a widening, undirected search never could in the first 23 years. There is also a quieter irony worth sitting with. Sunshine State Sonar's own leadership has pointed out that cases like this one are becoming less common, not because people disappear less often, but because of ordinary advances most drivers never think about. Roadside assistance systems, vehicle tracking, and connected cars now leave a digital trail that simply didn't exist in 2000. Had Libby driven off that road today, there is a reasonable chance her location would have been known within hours, not decades. Her case belongs in part to a narrow and closing window in automotive history, a moment before technology started keeping track of the places our cars go, even when we can't. Cases like this rarely end cleanly. The vehicle and the remains answer the question of where. They don't yet answer the question of how or why a woman less than half a mile from home never crossed that last stretch of road. Those questions may never be fully closed. The medical examiner's findings, once released, could narrow the possibilities, or they could leave the manner of death permanently undetermined, as happens in a meaningful share of cases, where a body is recovered only after decades underwater. Either outcome deserves to be reported honestly without dressing an open question up as a solved one. Libby Dibenedetto was 35 when she left a bar in Davie and never made it the rest of the way home. She left behind 3 children who grew up without an answer and a family that waited a quarter century for one. The road she was on, the pond that was never checked, and the technology that finally checked it are now part of the same story. A reminder that some of the hardest mysteries to solve aren't hidden in distant, difficult places. Sometimes they're sitting in plain sight, a few minutes from where the question was first asked.